Welcome to Mom on the Right. My name is Corine, and I am one angry chick. And it's not because my husband's underwear is on the floor or because I tripped on Elmo early this morning and spilled coffee all over myself. It's because I am worried about this country. Yes, I used to be a liberal. Now I'm a conservative and I know the truth. And I'm worried about our country. And I'm worried if we can hold on to the White House. Don't get me wrong, Trump is not an angel. But I don't want to end up in socialist Venezuela. And there are a lot of issues that are coming up every day that I have to rant about. And you know what? That's why I'm reaching out to a PR king right now, because I need someone to help me and you decipher through a lot of this information. So without further ado, what I have to say also is that this gentleman has helped many movie studios become a success with their movies. I believe 42. He has his own PR firm. He's just phenomenal. And he can help you become a success if you're interested in this field. God help you if you want to be in this field. Without further ado, it's Gary Schneeberger. Thank you so much, Gary, for coming on the show. And we are recording.
That is fabulous, Corinne. You are not only a thought leader, but you're a tech leader. That the recording's working, so that's good. But no, very great for me to see you doing something you're so passionate about, to see you and you know, your voice has always been an important one. To see it now put to something that really brings you alive is great. And you know, praise the days of small beginnings. This may be a small beginning, but you have a voice that people need to hear. And I have confidence that people will continue to hear it. It'll have nothing to do with me. Your guests will only go up from here after me. But I'm honored that you thought to bring me in here. And I'd do one thing as a PR guy. I'd change one thing. I'd frame it up a little different. Okay. You're not angry. You're passionate.
I love it. Okay.
That's a free bit of advice right there. You're a passionate observer.
I'm going to be charged.
You're a passionate observer of what's going on in our country. And we need more of that. So bravo.
I'm done. No, thank you. Yeah, thank you, Gary. And Gary, I was just, you know, it got to the point after, you know, I was into the fake news media space, and it just got to the point where I'm like, you know, I think after the Obama administration, I'm just like, oh my gosh, what is going on in my country? After the kid, that everything changes. And what can the conservatives do? What message? If you're working for Donald, what are you telling him? What message would you tell him and the conservatives? What do they need to do?
If I'm working for President Trump, my first thing would be, don't fire me. that would be number one. Yeah. You know, he's an interesting cat when it comes to the public relations space, because he doesn't really need, I don't know that conventional public relations help would help him, because he has found a way. He's cut out the middleman so much with the way he's used Twitter. I mean, to think back for a moment to even in the Twitter lifetimes of presidents, from President Obama. Bush probably had a Twitter account. I don't remember it. But President Obama certainly engaged, his administration engaged Twitter, but it was clearly somebody else doing it. And maybe he took pictures of Sasha and Malia and posted those, but he wasn't tweeting every day himself. Right. President Trump completely changed the game in doing that, and in large way, he's bypassed the press altogether. And he can create news, what I call commit news. He can create news simply by the way that he tweets. And there are people, I'm certain of it, there are people in major news outlets in this country whose only job, their beat, is Donald Trump's Twitter account. That's the power of what he's been able to do. So he's found his own way of kind of doing things. It's not conventional PR. One of the things I tell clients and prospective clients, don't look at Donald Trump and try to do what he does when it comes to engaging the press, because it ain't going to work for you. It works for him. When he was running for president, me and my vast knowledge, you know, and I wrote a book on public relations right here. Shameless plug for book right here. Bite the dog. I wrote a book, but in the course of that, I was like, at least 5 times, 6 times, I thought, okay, something President Trump said, something President Trump did, the way it was received by folks, especially liberal folks, especially folks in the media, I was convinced that would be the end of the candidacy. He said at one point during the campaign he could shoot somebody in Times Square and nobody would care. And well, I don't think that's true. there are a lot of things that I thought would sink his campaign that did not sink it. So
yeah, absolutely.
The thing, if I were to give advice to President Trump, I would, there are moments when he comes across a little more presidential than he does in other moments. I would encourage him to continue to do those, to do more of those kinds of things, to find those areas where he is at the State of the Union honoring servicemen. He is reaching out and helping people. Those stories that leak out, that the press doesn't necessarily want to report, that he donates his salary to certain good causes, that he's writing letters or making phone calls to people. That shows a human side of him that I think in large part he has done a bit of stripping that away with some of what can be the harshness and the directness of his tweets. And then the way that the press tends to cover him strips away some of the humanity that is there. And the more he can rely on that, it's hard for him to win converts among those who are convinced. We are more divided than ever in this country. But I think there are people who he can, who the middle's smaller than it's ever been, but the people who are there, he can win them over by leaning into those things that he is he's a human being. I heard you talking the other day about someone saying he's not a human. He's a human being. He has feelings. He has kids. He loves things about he loves America. Those kinds of things. Lean into those. Maybe don't tweet about them, but talk about them in the press. Let people in the press know about them. You can. There's a little secret. You can have people leak news stories to the press without you having to do it yourself. You can do those kind of things that will help raise his humanity level in the eyes of a public that is being told he's not human, or he's anti-American, or he's any of those things. Lean into those things, and that will have an impact. It's not going to dissuade your supporters. They're not going to think you're weak if you're more human. And it may pick you up some more supporters, which will help in 2020 rolls around.
And that was the rawness is what got him elected.
Right.
That rawness and that, that flippant attitude got him elected. And
what people tend to forget about how he got elected is he ran against, in the primaries, arguably the most diverse and most impressive array of Republican candidates ever to be assembled to run for president. Think back when Mitt Romney won the nomination and when John McCain won the nomination. There were a few candidates, but there weren't 12 to 15 guys who had pretty strong resumes and who had pretty good followings and who had, ethnic diversity and who had even ideological diversity within the Republican Party, from libertarian to, more conventional conservative Republicans. He ran against all those guys and beat every single one of them. That shows that within the party, he hit a nerve in the party of not wanting more of the same kind of politicians. And as good as those guys were, he stood out in stark contrast because he's not. There's a lot of things you can say Donald Trump is. A politician is not one of them.
And which, again, that's what has brought a lot of people to his table.
Correct.
Against it.
But even people who are not politicians, again, if you put me in a position to offer advice, even people who are not politicians are humans. And the more he points that out, he can circumvent the press. He can do things that the press won't cover necessarily. But he does have folks in the press who are friends. Sean Hannity, who's a friend of mine, is a friend of the president's. He can do things that will add to people recognizing that he's not what the press often paints him to be, and sometimes what his tweets can often confuse people into thinking he will be. All of us, you as a mom on the right, you have to teach your daughter the sort of the 5-second rule, right? Sometimes it's you drop food on the floor, you pick it up. If it's less than 5 seconds, you eat it. As they get older, the 5-second rule becomes if it feels like a good thing to say now, wait 5 seconds. If it still feels like a good thing to say, then say it. Calm down, slow down. I don't know that President Trump always follows the 5-second rule, and that's where he can kind of get in trouble and come across where he's particularly denigrating, not even in humorous ways, but ways that can sometimes seem mean and can sometimes seem less than presidential. If he can find a way to mollify that, I think that will go a long way to, again, he doesn't have to become a politician to do that, but there are ways to sort of dial up the humanity a little bit, dial up the concern. It's in him. We see it. If he can do that, I think it'll serve him well in 2020.
That's fantastic insight, because I haven't heard anyone mention that in the news, and even Sean Hannity. No one's mentioned that. You know, that would be they need to hire you.
Well, Sean could use the benefit of the 5-second rule sometimes too.
I know Sean. I heard him yesterday. Yeah, he does. Yeah. He's got some issues going on with his own. I love Sean, but yeah. You know, with the late-term abortion, it's being in Virginia, being actually originally from New York, and we've discussed this. It's really hit a lot of people really, really hard. I think we're still like in a mourning and a shock. I think, in my opinion, that should seal a deal for conservatives, right?
You would think so. And it's, think about what's happened in just one generation in our country on the issue of abortion. Okay, a generation ago when Bill Clinton was president, he and Hillary would say, yes, they want abortion to be legal, but they would say this phrase: they want it to be safe, legal, and rare. Okay? That was not what we're hearing today. A generation later, we've got shout your abortion as a hashtag that Planned Parenthood. They don't want safe, legal, and rare. They want legal and celebrated. That's what they want. They want people to cry out. They want women to cry out in joy and rapture about the fact that they had abortion.
Inspiration. You know, it's like
the actress
or something.
The actress Martha Plimpton, who you're too young to remember her work in the 80s, but I'm not. The actress Martha Plimpton, a month or so ago, said in Seattle during a speech that...
Wasn't she on the Goonies?
She was.
I know what you're talking about. I saw it.
Her first and best abortion, she told a crowd in Seattle, her first and best abortion took place in Seattle. And the crowd applauded her like it was the Beatles on the Ed Sullivan Show.
But if it's someone like me that said that, they'd be like, I would get booed off the stage.
Correct. That's the kind of thing, that's the change in the culture that has happened from safe, legal, and rare, which was liberals, the Clintons, but at least they were, you know what, we're not celebrating it. It's a decision a woman will make, and we shouldn't get it. Now people are celebrating it like it's a bar mitzvah, or it's a birthday party. And that speaks to the coarseness of our culture. And when you want to say, when people in the media, pundits, want to say Donald Trump is responsible for the coarseness of the culture, that is not true.
No,
liberals have contributed plenty to the coarseness of the culture. And the main thing they've contributed is this idea: go to New York when Cuomo signed that bill. What happened? There was applause. They applauded the fact that you can murder a baby at the point of viability. That is, that's evil. There's no other thing to call that but evil. And I think where we have the opportunity as conservatives and as Christians is to compare and contrast ourselves with them. I gave a speech a couple of weeks ago to a crisis pregnancy center up in Minnesota. And one of the lines in my speech was, let's find hope in this. Their side, the pro-abortion side, they traffic in endings. Our side, the pro-life side, celebrates beginnings. That's how we can begin to differentiate ourselves from those folks on the other side. And I think the more we talk about that, the more we talk about life and whole life, not just getting the baby born, but getting the baby taken care of, getting the, teaching classes to mothers on how to raise the child and and nutrition and those kinds of things. I think sometimes we can be criticized, and rightly so. We just want you to have the baby and then goodbye. We can't do that. We have to walk alongside the mother. You're a relatively new mom, right? You know how difficult it can be.
Absolutely.
And you had pretty optimal, you had better circumstances than certain women in crisis pregnancies do. We need to walk alongside them in ways and make that the idea of what we do. But there's a pillar in the Democratic Party platform that's about ending the life of unborn kids. There's a pillar in the Republican Party platform that's about saving the lives of unborn kids. For me, that ends the debate. And we need to do a better job of pointing out those differences and how radical they've become on the other side to celebrate abortion and to shout your abortion from safe, legal, and rare.
Yeah, exactly. And even people who are pro-choice are like, you know what, this is getting crazy.
Right.
Getting crazy. So that might be a message that a lot of conservatives and PR people can maybe, get across the platform more coming up, because it's so radical.
It is. It used to be. It was a decision that nobody. I've heard many people who are pro-choice, as they like to say. I'm not for abortion. I think abortion's bad, but if a woman's in a crisis situation and the health of the mother and those kind of things, then she should have the option. That's changed in just the last 6 months. That's changed now to, you can't tell me, if you're one of those folks who is shouting your abortion, you can't tell me that you're against abortion. You are for abortion. You think abortion is great. And here's the thing that nobody's reporting. I just spoke this morning to a woman who runs a ministry in Knoxville, Tennessee, who I may be working with, who talks about abortion affected women who have trauma. And one of the things she says is, in those rallies, when a Martha Plimpton says what she says, say there's 250 people in that room, there's some woman who's sitting there who does have trauma about an abortion that she had. And she can't talk about it. Maybe she's liberal and she can't talk to her friends about it because they'll think she's nuts. Maybe she's Christian and she goes to church and she's worried that the church won't accept her. As Christians, we have to do a better job of reaching out to women who've had that unfortunate experience and love them, and let them know that God forgives them. And on the other side, we need to have a place where liberal women who feel welcome, feel like they can come and they can tell their story, and will find it, and they can be part of healing. That's the thing that we have to be able to extend to folks. It's one thing to be against abortion, but we have to be for those women who've experienced that and have had trauma. And that's where working to help them heal is something that, it's not a platform of the party, but it darn well could be. And it should be a platform of us who support the party.
No, thank you for your insight on that. Again, it's actually heartbreaking and just mind-blowing.
Yeah.
Especially, the lack of medical care that will be given to a baby who survives a botched abortion. In Virginia, Tim Kaine, he's a Catholic boy. We expected a little bit more from him, but we knew he wasn't going to go against his party.
Right.
And, heartbroken, his decision to strike that bill down. Switching gears a little bit, what is your opinion on the freedom of speech, freedom of the press?
Big fan of it.
I know you're an advocate.
It is it's one of those things. I forget what founding father said it. Thomas Paine, somebody. I may disagree with what you have to say, but I will fight to the death for your right to say it. I still think that's true. I still think, even in the era of, I'm not as big a proponent, having been a newspaper reporter for a long time. I'm not one who thinks that everything that comes out of Washington, D.C. is fake news. I do think it can be colored sometimes by the opinions of reporters who aren't good. I don't believe there's such a thing as unbiased journalism. I write about it in my book, Bite the Dog, available on Amazon.
Which we are going to talk about, yes.
I don't believe it's possible to be unbiased. I was not unbiased as a reporter. If I was covering a trial, Corine, and I was sitting in the, out in the crowd, and I'm seeing someone on the witness box describing how she was abused, I thought the guy who was on trial was guilty. I'm like, you dirty, rotten scoundrel. You're guilty. But when I sat down to write my story, I made sure I was fair. So the issue isn't bias or unbiased. We're all biased. We all have opinions. What we have to do is put those opinions away when we're reporting, and we have to be as fair as we possibly can.
Well, everything is editorialized.
Correct. Everything these days, people
have Fox, which I like, but everything's editorialized.
If I can give your viewers a tip, it's this. As you consume news, understand the difference between a news reporter and a news commentator. Sean Hannity on the right, Rachel Maddow on the left, they get paid to have opinions. They're not reporters, they're pundits. So when they rant against something or are for something, that's legit. That's what they get paid for. It's those reporters who are injecting opinion into their stories from their own mouths.
Right.
That's the problem. If you bring in a source to say it, that's fine. If you're doing it yourself, that's wrong. I still get upset locally when I'm watching local news here at home when, you know, there's a car crash and someone survives. And the anchor looks at the camera and says, and we're just so glad that they're safe. I'm thinking, no, I don't want to know that you're glad that they're safe. That's not your job. Your job is to tell me they're safe. I'll be glad for you. It's that much of not injecting your opinion. So you got to be able to understand the difference between those who get paid to have opinions, a lot of them out there now, and then be able to discern those areas where people are, to get back to your question about freedom of the press, when people are kind of twisting that a little bit and taking advantage of that. No, freedom of the press should always exist, no matter how unfair some reporting is. But we, as the consumers of that, we should hold those folks accountable. We should. I once had a story done on me when I worked at Focus on the Family. A story was done on an event that we did. A reporter came out to visit the event. She wrote her story, and she did not quote us once in her story about our event. That was unfair. So she ended up getting fired, and I'm not upset that I'm the one that called her editor and said, what's going on here? We have to hold people accountable who are doing those kinds of things, who are taking advantage of the freedoms that they rightfully have, that they should have, but if they're using them in ways that are not right, that are not helpful to the culture, we need to hold them responsible by writing letters to the editor, writing things to their bosses, and making sure that stops. Because we're the consumers in the same way that we are the bosses of our elected officials, and a lot of them forget that, right? Yeah. They work for us. Journalists work for us. If we don't buy their papers, watch their TV shows, or listen to their radio shows, they don't have an audience, they don't have a job. We can hold them accountable by demanding fairness. Again, we can't demand that they're not going to be biased. 80% of journalists, this is going to shock you. I want to look at your shocked face. 80% of journalists in a poll by Gallup say they are Democrats. That is not a surprise. The thing becomes, though, can they be fair in the way that they report stories? That's what they have to do. And if they're not doing that, we have to hold them accountable.
Yeah, I personally feel like it's going more downhill because you don't even know what to read anymore, to be honest with you, to get fair and get the facts.
Yeah, and one of the reasons I think that's true, and I think to some extent, I've blogged about this, I think to some extent President Trump has been his own worst enemy in this regard, in that some of the things he says about the press have made them, in the eyes of the consumers of the press, to be the underdog. And if there's one thing we love in this country, it's an underdog.
Absolutely.
That's why there have been 8 Rocky movies made.
I mean, look at Rocky, yeah.
Since 1976, there have been 8 Rocky movies. Why? Because we love the underdog. Yeah. And President Trump, in the way in which he speaks of the press and fake news and coming up with cute nicknames to attack certain reporters, and some of the brusque ways he dismisses them at news conferences, I think that has helped the press become underdogs, and that's given them this sense of they can be a little less fair in covering President Trump because their audiences will put up with it. That's where we have to put our foot down and not put up with it. And if enough of us don't put up with it, they'll stop, because they've got to sell their product. If they can't sell their product, they're going to go out of business, like so many newspapers have.
Yeah, but there's this arrogance, you could see, and it's not just the left, and it's the right too. Don't get me wrong. It's just this arrogance. I can't even watch CNN. I used to watch them. I can't even stand to watch them anymore. MSNBC. It's just this arrogance and this, I know more than you.
Correct.
That's why I wanted to do this show. I'm like, I want to talk to people like you and be like, I want to learn more. Because I got people telling me I know more than you. Like in an arrogant talk down there. I got people like our Casey on New York telling me that millennials shouldn't have kids anymore. I got people telling, this information that people are stupid. And that's why I want to do the show. And it just, I think it's time that we got to do our own research. We got to read your book.
Yep.
You know, and we just need to do our own thing.
And there was a saying when I was coming up in journalism in the 80s. There's a, oops, I've just said how old I am, kind of. No, I'm not 80. In the 80s, I said. When I was coming up in journalism, there was a saying that our jobs as journalists were to afflict the comfortable and comfort the afflicted. So that's the Watergate mentality of there's corruption going on, we have to report it. And our job was to comfort afflict the comfortable. Don't let them get too comfortable. Be the watchdog of government, but then also to comfort those who are afflicted. And I think the flywheel has turned too much now to not just afflict the comfortable, but beat the tar out of the comfortable and to unfairly criticize the comfortable. I mean, look, if I'm a reporter today, even if I'm a conservative reporter, which I wasn't when I was a reporter, there's plenty of things I can find to criticize President Trump about. I don't have to make anything up.
Absolutely.
I think sometimes they go out of their way to look for things to make up. Part of that is not just him, it's the clickbait nature of what we do.
Oh, it's like with Melania.
Right.
With the First Lady. Yeah.
Right. So journalism is in crisis, is in trouble, which is why folks like you who are doing what you're doing are extraordinarily important, because it gives people a perspective that they're not going to get from some of their more traditional ways of doing things. Right. One of the things I point out in my book.
So why don't you tell me more about?
In my book, Bite the Dog, one of the things I point out is the media sphere has changed so much that some of the most influential media being done today is not done at a corporate office building in New York City, in Manhattan. Mm-hmm. It's being done in someone's living room. Yes. The power of blogs, the power of what you're doing right here to give people, a smorgasbord of information, yes. That all helps. What you're doing right here helps people at least pause to stop and say, I wonder if that report I saw put in the acronym of whatever station I'm listening to, I wonder if that is truly everything that there is to know about this story, or should I look at it more deeply? That's the value of this, of what you're doing. So bravo to you.
Well, bravo to you for that book and Bite the Dog. And can you there's so much information in it. And can you tell me, if I want to be a media changer, what do? I get your book. I'm looking through the chapters. What would you recommend?
Yeah, the book is, someone was gracious enough who endorsed it to say it's part handbook, part memoir. So there's a lot of stories about my own experience in journalism and PR in it. But also it's, the idea behind it is, if you have a message, you have something in your heart, like you do, you have a passion in your heart. How do you extract that passion from your heart and use what's in your heart to change other people's hearts? That's the core message of what I'm trying to do. Is it's leveraging media to get your point across. If you're an author, expert, speaker, coach, consultant, business owner, whatever, how do you leverage the media? I don't want to say use, but how do you work through the media in a way that gets your message out to a wider audience of people? There's a lot of stuff in here just in terms of one whole chapter 2, I think it is all about who the media are. And it's not exactly like you see on television who the media are. And by that, I mean depictions on TV of reporters. It's who are they? How can you determine who's fair, who's not fair, who's fake news, who's okay? How do you identify the difference between those guys who are Sean Hannity, who are all paid to have opinion, and those guys who shouldn't be putting their opinion in stores? So there is a lot of information in there about just helping you discern what you consume. There's not enough information. We're not as good of consumers of media as we should be. My hope is the book will help people understand media better, even if you don't want to make any news on your own, even if you don't want to go out and use media to get to raise your profile and raise your bottom line. If
Absolutely.
all you want to do is understand media better, then go, camp out in chapter 2 and read about what the media are like and who they are and what they believe and what studies show they are. And, the sixth most stressful profession in the United States is journalist, which I felt really bad about until I looked up and saw that the 8th most stressful
PR
profession is PR. Yeah, so I'm like, don't feel too bad for them. I'm only 2 steps above them and how hard it is. So I'm stressed. I got to work with them. They're stressed. It's just a big ball of, Prozac we need to be on.
I agree. Most of us as a nation probably are on it.
Yes, right.
At all. No shame, trust me, no shame in that. But well, I want to thank you so much for hanging out, chilling with me this afternoon, and and helping us get through this mess. And I hope you come back on, because I'm sure there's going to be other things going on in the world that we're going to need your book and your insight on.
Yeah. Absolutely. I'd love to. Again, one of the things that probably came through, and this about me, Corine, I'm not really shy about talking about stuff, including my book, Bite the Dog, available at Amazon.com.
Love it.
For
it's a great book.
The very low price of $14.99, endorsed by Roma Downey.
I love Roma.
Endorsed it. An angel says, buy my book.
Buy the book. Buy the book.
I've been endorsed by an angel. I've also been touched by an angel because we've hugged before, but I've been endorsed by an angel. So we have to, let people know.
Gary has some contacts, some connections.
And one of them being you. So bravo.
I'm not an angel in any capacity. But I could use some Roma in my life. But, since you, got brushed by her, maybe I'll transfer over here. But
yeah,
it's just a crazy world we're living in. And
well, as I said at the outset, your voice is one that's absolutely needed to be added to the discussion. So I hope I know you'll keep doing it, keep going after it. If I can be of any help at all in helping you land some guests to talk, we'll keep talking. So
of course we're gonna keep talking.
Well, of course, but obviously we'll keep talking, but we can keep talking on here too. So
absolutely, if you'll have us, I appreciate it. And all right, we'll just peace out then now, huh?
All right. See you guys.
Gary.